Hello everyone, welcome back to the tab. I hope you're doing good and preparing well for your exams. Today we'll be continuing with our management series wherein we are going to understand certain important topics from each and every chapter. Yesterday we discussed motivation wherein we discussed what is motivation and Maslow's theory. Today we'll be continuing with communication and today we'll be understanding the basic process of communication, what is communication, and one of the most important communication theory, that is Shannon and Weaver's model of communication. So do stay for the next 10 to 15 minutes and you will get to know what is this model exactly. Before starting the session, I have a very good news for you that we at EduTap are presenting a comprehensive guidebook for RBI Grade B and SEBI Grade A, which would answer all your common queries. Let it be the strategy of the exam, the pattern, the cut off, the resources to follow, and not just that, what the perks you will be receiving once you join the organization. All these informations are very basic and in nature, but it consumes a lot of your time and energy, because of which somewhere you feel demotivated and head start your preparation. So we are making this process very simple by compiling all these information in this single guidebook, which is not available anywhere else in a compiled manner. So do download this guidebook from the description link below, which would help you to, prepare in a very much better way. Moreover, if you are new to our YouTube channel, press the bell icon to receive the latest updates on various regulatory body examinations, and do join our Telegram channel to receive the PDFs of the session. So let's begin today's session. Today we'll be covering these topics. We'll understand what is communication, the difference between effective and ineffective communication, then what is the exact process of communication, then Shannon-Weaver model of communication, and lastly the advantages and disadvantages of the model. So do stay throughout. I'm starting the session. Now, the first thing which comes into your mind when I say communication is transmission of information from the sender to receiver. But is that the actual definition? No, that is not the actual definition of communication. The communication is not just about transmission of information or data to someone else, but it is more of an understanding. Which means it is not just about, directing the other person to do something, but it is a more of a participatory scenario. I hope you understood what I mean to say, that it is a participatory scenario, which means if I communicate something to you, it should not be a one-way channel. There should be appropriate feedback which I receive, wherein we, end up doing a particular task in a better manner. So that is what communication is. And when we look into communication from an organization's point of view, it becomes a very important tool to, achieve the major goals of the organization, let it be profitability or growth of the organization. So we can say it is the most effective tool to meet the goals of an organization. Okay. And keep in mind, it is not just restricted to information, and as I said it is more about understanding. Chester Bernard also said that the first function of an executive is to develop and maintain a system of communication. See, irrespective of the size of the organization, let it be a small organization or a big organization, or let's say the organization is very simple, or let's say if it is complex, it doesn't matter the type. Communication would always play an important role in each and every organization. So this is what communication is. So, there's a famous saying that we always, listen to someone to reply, but it should not be that. The process of communication is more about understanding and coming into a common conclusion. Okay. Now let us move ahead and understand the difference between effective and ineffective communication. So the basic word effective itself means that something which brings a positive output or a positive outlook. So whenever I say the word effective communication, it means that the communication has been very clear. Let's say there is a team lead A who wants to communicate certain orders to his, teammates, PNC. Okay, in case of a effective communication, the information which he tells to these people is very clear and it is easily understood by these two. Okay, and not just that, it is consistent, means whatever this person is going to say would be consistent throughout the process, and it would be open, which means these people would be sending back feedback, or when I mean to say feedback, these people will let their team leads know actually what did they understand or what else they want to understand. Okay. On the other hand, what is an ineffective communication? As the word suggests, that ineffective means the effect of the communication has not been proper. The information, let's say, which A wanted to communicate to these people was not clear. It was inconsistent. And moreover, what does this inconsistent, ineffective communication cause? It causes a huge miscommunication. There is a communication gap which takes place. Okay? So, what happens because of this huge miscommunication gap, I mean to say. See, there is a huge effect on the organization, there's a huge effect on the project, and moreover, there's a huge effect on the employees or the individuals as well. See, when I say what is the effect on the organization, in case of a ineffective communication, if say the communication was not successful, there would be, this would, result in hampering the goodwill of the company. The growth might be less. Okay. Now, when I speak about a project within an organization, what happens if the communication process is not apt? What would happen? The project would get delayed. There would be losses. Moreover, whatever goals, the ultimate goal which the organization wanted to achieve would get hampered because of miscommunication. And moreover, lastly, how does miscommunication affect individuals or employees in an organization? What happens is whenever there is miscommunication, there results a misunderstanding. Okay, misunderstanding between whom? Between the colleagues. This makes the whole team less effective. So I hope you are clear how does miscommunication affect organization, project, and individual. Now, let us take an example and understand the process of miscommunication. See, miscommunication can be of any type. You might convey a wrong message in a written or a verbal form, or the other person may not be able to interpret the message in the prompt manner, or at times the body language is not apt. You want to convey something, but it is getting conveyed something else. So let us take the example of this situation wherein let's say there are two colleagues A and B in an office. Sorry. Let's say there are two colleagues and let's say A sends an email to B. But B is not able to decode whatever he typed in the message, which means whatever A wanted to convey, he did not he was not successful to make the person B understand the same. So what happens because of this? Person B just does not reply back to the mail, and when person A comes and asks to this person that why you did not reply me back, he just says that I was not able to understand whatever you communicate. So this communication gap, what does this communication gap do? It hampers the overall process. More time is consumed to complete certain work. I hope you understood the difference between effective and ineffective communication. Now that you have understood What is communication and effective and ineffective communication? Let us understand the process of communication. I mean, how does the communication process take place? Okay. So, what are the various steps involved in the communication? The first step is the developing of idea by the sender. Who is the sender? The information source. Okay. Information source is the sender. So what does the sender do? What is the work of the sender? He decides why to send the message and what to send. Matlab why does he want to communicate something? What is the motivation or purpose behind sending the message? And what does he want to communicate is decided by the sender. Now, once the sender decides what has to be sent to the receiver or the people, the next step is encoding. What is encoding? Encoding or encoder, you can say, is the process of transmission. Okay, what do I mean by the term transmission? See, let's say this sender chooses a mode of communication, let's say telephone. Okay. Now, what would telephone do? Let's say this person spoke something on telephone. The telephone would transmit the message further. So how would it transmit? It would just convert the voice into binary data. This is binary data. So that it is just transmitted further. And let's say this person chooses a radio to communicate an information. So radio is the transmitter. What does radio do? It converts voice into signals for further communication. So this is what encoding or transmitting process is. The next thing is message. What is the message? The sender must have wrote something. Let's say if he's sending it on text or email, or let's say he's speaking on the call, the words which he uses to express what he wants to say becomes the message. Or let's say in case of text, the sentence or the words used to form the message becomes the actual message. Now there is selection of medium. What is selection of medium? How do I send the message? Am I going to use a telephone, or am I using let's say WhatsApp? All this becomes the medium of message. And once the message is transmitted, the message is again decoded by the receivers, and there's a receiver who receives the message. Let's say there's a person B to whom A wanted to communicate the information. So he receives the message, he decodes the message. Decoding is nothing but understanding what did the sender actually send. And then once he decodes the information, the receiver sends a feedback. So what is basically a feedback? A feedback is just a response. Response to what? Response to whatever the sender sent, to the receiver. Let's say he says, hi, let's meet for coffee. Okay. So once this person decodes that, okay, this person wants me to meet for coffee, he'll say yes or no or anything else. And that is known as feedback process. I hope you understood what exactly is the process of communication. So let us understand this with an example. Let's say, as I said you, what are the various elements which are present in the communication process. Let us understand this with an example. Let's say you decide to go out on a movie with your friend. So you become whom? The sender of the message. This is the sender. Now, what do? You decide what to text and why to text. What are you going to text? Let's go for a movie. And why are you texting this? Because you want to see the movie. Okay. Now this phone becomes the medium of communication. The words which you typed, whatever you want to inform your friend, becomes the message. Okay. And the phone would convert your text message again into some binary data which would be fed back again to the receiver's phone. Now once your friend receives the message, she opens the chat and she reads that you want to go for a movie which starts at 9. So once you understand this, what you do, you decode the message. First you decode it, which means you understand what your friend is wanting to tell, and then you send a reply to her, which is known as feedback. So you tell, okay, I'll pick you up by 8:30. This replying back process to your friend is known as feedback. I hope this is very simple and very easy to understand. Let's move to the most important models of communication, Shannon and Weaver model of communication. This is also known as mother model of all the communications. Why? Because firstly, when was this model developed? This model was developed in 1948 by Shannon and Weaver. Okay. Now, it was called mother model because it was a revolutionary step. See, basically, the first thing which you need to keep in mind is when this model started, Shannon and Weaver presented it as a mathematical model. Okay? It was a mathematical model which was then widely accepted in various modes of communication. Okay? So, they basically designed this using for scientific purposes. They wanted to understand how does the process of communication takes place in case of a phone or internet. Okay, but widely eventually it started getting used in various forms of communication. So that is why this model is also known as information model, or at times it is also known as Shannon model, because he played a huge role in designing these concepts. Now, according to Shannon and Weaver, before getting into this diagram, you need to just keep in mind this model was called revolutionary because they introduced the concept of noise. Okay? They were the first people to address or express the fact that noise takes a big toll on the communication process. Okay? So what does Shannon and Weaver model consists of? So it has basically 8 components, please keep in mind. Now the first component becomes the sender, or as I said you, is the information source. So there is a sender who would be going to send, let's say person A is the sender and person B is the receiver. A would be sending message which would be encoded. There is an encoder which would convert the given input into certain binary digits or signals, let's say, given on the type of the transmitter being used. Now there is a channel. What is the channel? You can say the cable. Cable is a channel. To be more precise, it is the mode. Channel of communication, not mode actually, it is channel. So what is the channel in case of a telephone? The cables used in communication become the channel. That is, what is the channel? It just it sources the information from the sender and the encoder so that it can be further sent to the receiver or the destination. Okay? So in case of a phone, the cable becomes a channel. Let's say you're writing an email. What would be the channel? Internet, web. That would become a channel. So after that, they said that there comes a decoder. What is the decoder? It's just opposite of the encoder. What does the decoder do? Whatever messages had been converted by the encoder, let's say the voice was converted into binary digits by encoder. This decoder would again convert that binary digits to voice, or let's say, voice, let's say, and then it would be so that it would be easily understood by the receiver. Who is the receiver? The ultimate, person who wants to receive the information. That is also known as the destination. Now, once the receiver receives the message, he is going to send a feedback. As I said you, what is a feedback? It is just replying back or communicating back. Now let us understand this Shannon and Weaver model with an example. Before going further, there's this concept of noise. What is noise? Noise is simply disturbance. Okay. You need to keep in mind noise is disturbance, and this is what Shannon and Weaver said, that this takes or creates huge impact in the form of communication, because of which whatever information the sender wants to send is not effectively communicated to the receiver. So what do you mean? That noise is a disturbance, and where can it take place? Noise can be present, let's say in case of encoding or in case of decoding. So basically, we can classify noise into two types. I'll tell you what are the two classifications. See, noise can be classified into internal and external noise. Now, what is internal noise and what is external noise? Now, internal noise is that disturbance which is, let's say, is present on the sender's end. That is, let's say there is some process in encoding. Let's say the text which I sent to my friend, it had some spelling mistakes. Or let's say I am on a call, I mispronounced something. Let's say I mumbled something. That becomes a example of internal noise. Now on the receiver's end, what can be an internal noise? Let's say the person was not able to understand whatever I wanted to communicate on phone. Okay, that becomes an internal noise. What is an external noise on the other hand? Now, let's say I am on a highway, I receive a call, and because of the horns going around, I'm not able to understand what the other person on the telephone is telling because of the external noise. Let's say horn. There is distortion of information. This type of disturbance is known as external noise. I hope you understood the difference between internal and external noise. Okay. Now let's take an example that what Shannon and Weaver wanted to communicate. They said, they gave an example, you can take an example of a telephonic conversation. Let's say there's a person, Thomas, who wants to receive certain files from his assistant. So he calls his assistant to give him the required files. So who is the sender in this case? Thomas is the sender. Who sender of the information? What is the encoder? The telephone becomes the encoder. The telephone is going to convert his message into binary signals. What is the channel? As I said, is the cable. Now let's say when the receiver hears this voice, he's not able to hear it clearly. He just hears that he wants, that's all. That he is not able to hear this whole term correctly, that Thomas wants his files. So now what happens is the noise is distraction in voice. Let's say there was some distraction in Thomas' voice. So what kind of firstly noise is this? Is this an internal noise? His voice was not communicated properly. So what happens? The receiver, that is the assistant, is not able to understand, and then he sends a feedback telling what did you actually ask. So this is what Shannon and Weaver's model actually said. They just said that noise takes a huge toll on the information which is communicated, and moreover, by working on reducing this noise factor, the overall effect of the communication can be improved. Okay. Now let us lastly understand the advantages and the criticism or disadvantages of Shannon and Weaver model. Now the biggest advantage was, as I said they were the first one to introduce the concept of noise in communication as a whole. So they said that communication though distorts the information, by working on the important aspects of reducing noise, the process of communication can become effective. Now, moreover, this model was a two-way process. I mean, it is not just, just telling it to someone and just, ending the conversation. Now, eventually, as I said it was introduced as a mathematical model, but eventually it came into acceptance as a general model of communication. And most importantly, Shannon and Weaver said that this communication which takes place is quantifiable in nature. Now, what were the major criticisms which this model faced? Many people argued that Shannon and Weaver model cannot be used for mass communication, which means, let's say, it can only be used for interpersonal communication, which means there is a sender on the phone and there is a receiver on the other end. People argued that we cannot communicate using this model if there is a single sender and multiple receiver or people who want to receive the information. This was not possible in case of Shannon-Weaver model. Moreover, people also argued that in case of Shannon and Weaver model, the receiver is not playing a huge role. It is the sender of the information who is just sending the information, and the receiver remains passive throughout the communication. Apart from that, people also argued that the concept of feedback, it did not play an important role, which means feedback was not given that much of importance like the information, you know, which means whatever the assistant said in our example was not given that much priority in comparison to the actual message sent. And lastly, many people said that this model is misleading in nature. Why? Because all human communications are not mathematical in nature. So we cannot apply Shannon and Weaver model in all sorts of communication. I hope you understood what is communication, the basic concepts, and the one of the most important models, that is Shannon and Weaver model. So I hope you enjoyed this session. So keep learning. All the best. Thank you.